Hello, everyone. Today we have our next butterfly talk with Thomas Schmitt. Sorry for the pronunciation, the German. He is director for the Senckenberg German Entomological Institute, and he has a lot of experience in different aspects of the biology, ecology, and biogeography of butterflies. And today he's going to talk about butterflies as ecological indicator in Kenya. So really interesting topic to know more about the diversity, all the things of butterflies there in Kenya, for sure, really interested. So welcome everyone. I hope you enjoyed this talk. The floor is yours, Thomas, when you want.
Yes, thank you, Christina, for this friendly introduction of myself. And I hope to show you in the next little more than half an hour some interesting insights in our work on the butterflies of Kenya. And I try now to share my screen with you. You should now, yes, you should now see.
Perfect, Thomas, yeah.
No, don't see what I wanted you to see. I have to go. Did not work like I wanted that it works. Bildschirm 2. So.
We can see it. The first.
No,
it was okay before. Before was okay.
Yeah, no. It's not showing what I wanted to show. This is interesting.
Switch the screen you select. Maybe you have to.
Why? No, it's not showing
the notes or something.
It's not showing the presentation. It's only showing the PowerPoint. Oh, nee. Why?
We see it in presentation mode, but maybe yes. You are missing the notes.
You don't see it in presentation mode. That's the problem that I have.
These technical issues always.
Yeah, but Thomas, we saw it in presentation mode. It was full screen, at least with me.
Aha.
For us.
I tried once more. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we see the presentation mode. And then,
Now it's okay.
No, it's okay. You see it in presentation mode. Okay, that's great. That's great. So, okay, let's start.
Yeah, thank you.
So I want to present you now three study, and you also see my my pointer. Yes, that's great. I want to present you three study systems. The East African savannas with gallery forests, a study on coastal dryland forests, and a study on cloud forests of the Eastern Arc Mountains. And let's start with the savannas, which is the typical habitat for East Africa. They often look like that. And within these savannas, you often have along water courses, you have gallery forests, which are something special. And in this system, we had several key questions that we wanted to answer with our research. We wanted to know what is the difference in the butterfly communities between dry and rainy season in the savanna habitats, and why? If you look at the savanna habitat, you see it's very different from dry to rainy season. We also wanted to know how this is in the cultivated land, which also looks very different if it is dry or rainy season, and along the gallery forests. Well, here where there is water during the rainy season, it's exactly the same river that you see here. This is the dry season and this is the rainy season, and we wanted to know all these differences. We also wanted to know whether the cultivated land, which often looks a bit like savannas, can be a surrogate of the savanna habitats, and we wanted to know the influence of the gallery forests on the adjoining areas. Where did we perform our study? This was here in southern Kenya, close to the city of Kitui, and we had one area which is the university campus of the Southeast Kenya University, which is really 100 square kilometers of only little disturbed savanna, and south of the city of Kitui, where we have typical African cultivated landscapes. We established a lot of transects along 2 different non-permanent water courses, 8 transects in each landscape immediately at the river course, 8 250 meters away and 8 500 meters away. Well, we had to establish all these transects. We had a lot of students which were helping us. And we walked in total 115 kilometers of transect for this study. And therefore, we walked a total of 600 kilometers. So it's quite a lot of work. We also established bait traps, but I don't want to show you the results. It's just that you get some interesting additional species with these traps. Well, and they were established like that. Well, if you're working in Kenya, you have to be careful with things like that. This is not just a line on a path. It's, well, ants, and these ants, they like to attack you. So stay away from that. Only look for the butterflies and don't go too close to the ants. They can bite nastily. Now let's have a short look at the diversity values that we receive during the dry and the rainy season. And if we compare it in the cultivated and the savanna landscape, there is, if you go to the savanna, an extreme difference between the rainy season, where we had more than 8,000 counts, mostly of these whites, and in the dry season, where we had around about 1% of the number of individuals that we had during the dry rainy season. So there is an extreme difference in the abundance of butterflies in the savanna habitats. If you go to cultivated landscapes, there's less butterflies in the rainy season, but much more during the dry season, because there is well, more water available during the dry season in the cultivated areas, but it's not as important as a butterfly habitat during the rainy season. Well, if you look at the differences that we get among habitats, among seasons, and make this with general linear models, we get for the species richness a very high importance of the study sites. So there is a strong difference between the savanna habitats and the cultivated landscape. The season has an even larger impact on the studied communities, and also the combination of study site and season has an importance on species richness, but this is not that important. If you look at the community composition, it's also a strong different impact of the study site, also of the season, but even of the combination of study site and season. And the abundance is also strongly impacting the community composition. If you now look at different traits, we can give to each of the species that we had a trait, and we elaborated a savanna trait. So this says, how typical is this species for a savanna habitat? And here you can see that there is some difference in the savanna index between the cultivated landscape, which is here the orange things, and the savanna landscape, which is the yellow ones. So in the savanna, you have a higher savanna index than in the cultivated landscape. If you look at the tree index, so species that need the presence of trees, this obviously is significantly higher in the cultivated landscape because they have their mango trees and things like that. And this allows some of the species that are in need of trees to occur there, and a bit more than in the savanna habitats, which only have these acacias. If you now look at the forest index, so species that need some type of forest, there's a very strong difference between the cultivated landscape and the savanna landscape. So these mango trees and whatever you have as fruit trees, they allow some of the typical forest species to occur, which are mostly absent from the typical savanna habitats. If you look at the distribution, so which are the widely distributed species, it's interesting that in the savannas, there is on average more widely distributed species than in the cultivated landscape. And this also has something to do with the fact that the savanna has these typical savanna species, and most of these savanna species, they are fairly widespread throughout the African savanna ecosystems. And therefore, in the savanna ecosystem, you have the more widespread species than in the agricultural landscape. If you look at Hammurabi, this is interesting. There is not really a trend. So it's not that the species adapted to human impact are much more found on the agricultural sites than on the in the little disturbed savanna habitats. The same also applies to habitat specialization. There is no significant difference between these two systems. And even for trophical specialization, there is no major difference. So what can we extract from this? How do dry and rainy season differ? They differ very strongly in all types of habitats. But it's not that there is a typical community for the dry and the rainy seasons. It's just that a lot of the species that you find during the rainy season in high abundances are mostly disappearing or becoming very rare during the dry season. So it's just that these communities are going down in their numbers and in their composition a bit, but it's not different communities that you find during these seasons. One of the typical species that you can find throughout the year is this wonderful Eunonia hierta, which you can see on the right. The change between dry and rainy season is less intense in the cultivated landscape, where you have the human impact that guarantees more water throughout the year, and it's more extreme in the mostly natural savanna habitat. And interestingly, the distance to gallery forest apparently has no major impact in this case. The question whether cultivated landscape is a surrogate of savanna is clearly to be answered with yes and no, because most savanna species also occur in the cultivated land, but the cultivated land is enriched by species that are in need of trees and water, like, for example, different Naptis species, which you can see on the right. It's also that there is some more species that are adapted to human activities that can be found more in the cultivated land, like here the Hippolymias missipus, but this, could not be proven by statistical support. And typical savanna species are less common in cultivated landscape, like a lot of the Charaxus species, and this in particular was true for Charaxus zoolina, which was pretty common in the savanna and pretty rare in the cultivated landscape. Well, what about the gallery forests? What is their influence on the adjoining areas? The gallery transects in themselves, they differ more strongly than from the gallery forests to the adjoining areas. Therefore, there's a lot of diversity along these gallery forests, what make it difficult to really say what their influence on the adjoining areas is. But we could find a weak statistical effect that demonstrate this impact of the gallery forests on the adjoining areas. And some of the butterfly species, they are really restricted to the gallery forests, like here, Eurytela dryope or Papilio nireus, which we did not find further away from these water courses in the gallery forests. But, and this is wonderful, you have exciting butterflies everywhere, and even these agricultural landscapes, they are not as destroyed as many of the European agricultural landscapes. You find wonderful butterfly species and large abundances everywhere. Now let's go to our Bucosokoko coastal dry forest. This is Ghetto Ruins, which is quite interesting, where you have this forest too. And well, this forest is also in southern Kenya. It's somewhat north of Mombasa, and we established a lot of transect in this forest and around this forest. It was funny to get to our study sites. We also always needed some local transports. Well, we all survived it. And we investigated different types of forest. This is the very close type of forest. This is the Tsunametra forest, which is dense and looks a bit like a shrub. Then you have the more open, a bit savanna-like forest dominated by Brachystegia trees, and also the mixed forest, which is a mixture of very different trees. And if you're walking the paths, you often find things like that. And what's that? Well, one evening we went to this site, which is an opening at the margin of this forest, and we were waiting. And at 6 o'clock, the first elephant was coming out. And then we had a lot of elephants there, and they are really living in that forest. And therefore it was a bit, well, once we also had to flee from one of them, we always had to be a bit carefully for not getting victims of elephants. We also had transects at the forest margin and in plantations, which often look like that. So it's not like a plantation of eucalyptus that you have in Southern Europe or so. It's a mixture of everything. And well, what you find is, for example, a variety of different species of Graphium, which is typical Afrotropical forest butterflies. Well, we had two major research questions that we wanted to answer. How do the butterfly communities of these habitats differ? And which differences exist between the dry and the rainy season? Well, if you look at the rainy season, we found a very clear differentiation among these forests. This is all the transects that we had in the Brachystegia forest. This is the ones in the mixed forest, and the Tsunametra forest, this more dense forest, was also differentiated from the other two. The forest margin was also different from the forest interior and was overlapping with the plantations. So we have a clear differentiation between all these 5 different habitat types. And you also see that the 3 different forest types also differ, especially the very dense Tsunametra forest from the more open mixed forest and Brachystegia forests. If you now go to the dry season, the difference of individuals is not as extreme as, for example, in the open savanna. But yes, this I also wanted to show you. There are some typical species which you find in the interior of the forest, and there are others which are found more in plantations or in the forest at the forest margin, where you have these open area species. If you now go through the dry season, this nice structuring is breaking down completely. There is no structure, so all the species, they are mixing. The open area butterflies are going into the forest. The forest species are found in the plantations. So there is a real mess and mixture of all the clearly differentiated elements of the rainy season. If you then look at the species richness and abundance between rainy and dry season, you have a very strong difference in species richness and abundance in the forest. You see Brachystegia forest, Tsunametra forest, and mixed forest. It's an extreme difference in richness and abundance between a rainy season and dry season. If you go to the forest margin, the difference is less, and there is no difference in the plantations. There are as many individuals and as many species in the plantations in the dry and the rainy season. And it looks like that some of what is in the forest is going to the margin and to the plantations during the dry season because there is more flowers. And if you look at the trait differences, you can see that the wing size is much less during the dry season than during the rainy season, and also the abundance is much higher during the rainy season than during the dry season. All the other traits that we looked were not differing from rainy to dry season. Well, let's answer our key questions. How do the butterfly communities of these habitats differ? Well, they differ strongly, and we have a differentiation within the different forest types and to the forest margin and the plantations. But, and this is the question about the dry and the rainy season, this only applies to the rainy season, not to the dry season. And here, this also might represent a problem that we have for conservation if these forests are getting too small. It looks like that there is a transfer of individuals from the forest to the plantations, from the rainy to the dry season. But the plantations, they have not the habitats which these species need for their permanent survival. So it might be that there is a drainage of individuals to the plantations, which is a dead end. And this, in case of too small forests, Arabuca sococa, fortunately, is about 300 to 400 square kilometers. So this is sufficiently large. But if you go to smaller fragments, this might be a problem of conservation. Well, if you might be there, you also should go to the coast. There is one of the most wonderful mangroves that I know. This is the mangroves of Meadow Creek, which look like that. There is no butterflies, but other wonderful things that you also should look if you are there in that area. And now let's go to the third study that I want to present you here. This is a study which we performed in the Taita Hills cloud forests. Well, this is one of the last fragments of this cloud forest in Taita Hills, which are still preserved. That is shown here on this picture. This is the Chavia forest, and it's a typical Afromontane cloud forest, and often looks like that. If it looks like that, you have no chance to count butterflies, but there is also sunny days when it's really worth looking for butterflies. It can be terribly cold at night. Well, where is this mountain area located? And this is again the south of Kenya. This is Nairobi. This is Mombasa, and Taita Hills. They are here. This small mountain range, which you see in this circle, and there is also a city which is nearby. This is the city of Voi, and well, from here, Taita Hills, you can see Kilimanjaro, and it's close to the Pare Mountains and the Usambara Mountains in Tanzania. Well, we could use the facilities of the Taita Taveta University. They have a mountain campus which is close to these mountain cloud forest fragments. The landscape looks like that. So what you can see is there is scattered all over, there is little housings, and there is a lot of agriculture. What is forest is mostly eucalyptus, it's mostly plantations. On this picture, you see not a single minor fragment of the typical cloud forest. Unfortunately, the cloud forest has mostly vanished. This is the area, the green one, which formerly was covered by cloud forest. There is only 3 major cloud forest fragments, which have, round about 1 square kilometer, and this one has around about 2 square kilometers. So it's 4 square kilometers of major forest fragments. And this is, well, I think it's something like 2% of the former cloud forest, which is still remaining. And we worked in the Chavia cloud forest here at the southern margin of Taita Hills. We established 8 transects within the cloud forest, 8 transects at the margin of the cloud forest, which looks like that with this fern trees and all these nice things. Our transect often looked like that. And we established 8 transects in plantations, which here often are eucalyptus, and 8 in the agricultural matrix. Well, the agricultural matrix looks like that, and the plantations can look like that. So there can be elements of the cloud forest in these plantations, and there are other plantations which completely lack these elements. This will be important later on. During our study, we found 105 butterfly species and we counted close to 4,000 individuals. If you look at the wing lengths of the butterflies, you can see that the individuals in the cloud forest, this is the margin of the cloud forest, this is in the cloud forest, the individuals are considerably larger than in the agricultural matrix, and they're also considerably larger than in the plantations. But if you split these plantations into plantations without cloud forest elements and with cloud forest elements, you see that the plantations with cloud forest elements have larger individuals than the ones which lack the cloud forest elements. If you look at the distribution, so how widely distributed are these species? They are very widely distributed in the agricultural landscape, because this is the typical African savanna species which you find there. And here at the margin and in the cloud forest, you have the typical forest species which have much smaller distribution areas, so they are considerably less widely distributed. And then the plantations without cloud forest elements, they are like the agricultural landscape. The ones with cloud forest elements, they are a bit like in their distributions like the forests themselves. And this also is reflected in the habitat demand. So these are the ones which need these forests, which are found in the forest and in plantations which have the cloud forest elements. If you have only plantations without these elements, you find the typical savanna species, which are like the ones which are in the agricultural landscape, not in need of these forests. If you look at the habitat specialization, the specialized species you have in the forests, you don't have them in the agricultural landscape, you don't have them in the plantations without the elements, but you find some of these in the plantations which have cloud forest elements. If you then make a detrended correspondence analysis, you get a very nice differentiation. You have the primary cloud forest transects here on the left, then you have the forest edge, you have the plantations, which have some elements which look a bit like the forest, but not really like the forest interior. So they are not being a surrogate of the forest itself, and the agricultural landscape at the other extreme. Well, they're not only very nice and interesting butterflies which you find in that area, you also find things like that, like the chameleon Kinyongia boumei, which is an endemic chameleon for the Taita Hills. It's only found in this small mountain range. Well, let's look again at the landscape of the Taita Hills, and that shows you a lot of the problems that you find in Africa. If you are not in national parks or other protected areas, the area is scattered by a lot of, well, people living everywhere and having small-scale agriculture, subsistence agriculture, and the habitats themselves, they are strongly modified so that the original habitats have mostly vanished. And one of the major problems that we have in East Africa, but not only in East Africa, but almost all over Africa, is population growth. These wonderful children, which have a lot of fun here, they will end up, well, within few years, many of them, like these young guys that are waiting for someone who needs, well, a ride to some place. And, well, population growth and little work options, this is really a high problem for the African landscapes, because it's exploited everywhere. And for example, this person was taking out feed for well, goats and cows and whatever from the cloud forest. So the forest, the small fractions which are lost, they are further exploited, overexploited. They are taking out timber. The forests, they are shrinking everywhere. So overpopulation and overuse is a very big problem that we have. And at the end, well, the timber which is taken out from the forest is ending up at the market. And here, this is a picture from Nairobi, where this wonderful young woman was selling charcoal for cooking. Yes, and well, nature is wonderful in Kenya. We have extremely beautiful butterflies and extremely beautiful habitats, but it's really in danger. It's disappearing more and more, and there is severe conservation problems that we have. Well, but for not being too pessimistic, I want to end with this wonderful butterfly species of the cloud forest, and the mother of pearls will open its wings, and it's, well, wonderful what is left, but it's in high threat. Thank you for your attention.